Imagine this. Yesterday marks 1 month from the fall of the Berlin Wall. Today is the UN's Human Rights Day, and tomorrow is December 11th, 1989, the first day of the 11th Congress of the League of Communists of Croatia. You've heard rumors that the Socialist Republic of Croatia might drop socialist from its name and hold free multi-party elections. As a member of the League of Communists, the only legal political party in the country of Yugoslavia, you've been involved in elite party structures, but if communism becomes democracy, those structures won't exist anymore. What will you do next? My thesis is situated in the aftermath of Croatia's regime change and declaration of independence from Yugoslavia in the early 1990s. In examining what happened to the former regime's political elite, my thesis is informed by sociological literature written on elite circulation and reproduction. In all regimes, we know that political elites do not remain in their positions indefinitely. Instead, there is movement. New people come to occupy elite positions at the same time that members of the elite may lose elite status. At the heart of the term elite is the idea of a chosen minority, defined in the political context as one that monopolizes decision-making power. In other words, elites are powerful actors in top-level positions. In the context of regime change, elite circulation occurs when, in the new regime, new people come to hold the elite positions formerly filled by the former regime's elite. On the other hand, elite reproduction occurs when members of the former regime's elite retain the same elite positions in the new regime. For example, simple reproduction occurs when a person retains the same position in the same sector, such as when a politician remains in politics, and reproduction by conversion occurs when a person comes to hold an elite position in a different sector, such as when a politician becomes a CEO. Much work has been done on the topic of elite movement after the fall of communism in Hungary and Poland. This work largely consists of aggregate statistics calculating the percentage of communist elite that remained in politics, transferred their political capital to the business sector, or retired. However, significantly less work has been done on this topic using data from Yugoslavia. Another gap in the literature is a lack of individual-level data. Although broad trends are interesting, it's also interesting to examine the individual decisions that aggregate to form them. This brings me to my research question. After the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia fell apart in the early 1990s, what happened to the people in power, and how did they navigate the democratic regime in the newly independent Republic of Croatia? Furthermore, how do certain factors help explain the differing career paths of the former regime's political elite after the fall of communism in Yugoslavia? To answer this question, my approach involves quantitative data that measures the form of elite movement experienced by a subset of the political elite of Yugoslavia, focusing on simple reproduction to determine whether or not the former regime's political elite remained in politics after 1990. I also use qualitative data in the form of 10 semi-structured interviews with members of my sample of the former regime's political elite that had not passed away in the summer of 2017. Each interview lasted about an hour and examined specific factors that influenced elites' career decisions after 1990. Although Yugoslavia was not a satellite state of the USSR, its political configuration was similar to that of Communist Russia in that important political decisions were made in Communist Party structures rather than in structures of the government. With the fall of communism and the legalization of new political parties, these party structures were eliminated. Today, political decisions are made through the structures of government that have remained, which is the case for democracies worldwide. In defining the former regime's political elite, I took this parallel structure into account and focused on people who were directly involved in the League of Communists rather than in government structures. Through research at the Croatian State Archives, I compiled a list of 807 individuals who were involved in the Central Committee of the League of Communists of Croatia and its related bodies, from the party's second Congress in 1948 to its 11th and final Congress in 1989. Using a Who's Who online database maintained by Croatia's government, I also compiled a list of members of my sample who held state-level political and public positions after 1990. After cleaning these data, I found that 70 members of my sample had been involved in these positions after the fall of communism. Because I have not yet calculated the number of individuals in my original sample that had passed away or reached retirement age by 1990, I cannot yet draw conclusions about aggregate levels of simple elite reproduction, but it will be exciting to compare the numbers I calculate to the numbers seen in the literature. The second component of my thesis involves qualitative data analysis. Based on interview data, I have identified certain factors that were relevant to my interviewees in making decisions about their career paths after 1990. As I continue to analyze these data, I hope to develop a theoretical structure of factors that were common and relevant to individual elites in their decisions, examining their correlation with career outcomes in order to draw broader conclusions about post-communist elite movement. First of all, for a person to be democratically elected to office, public opinion must be in his or her favor. After the fall of communism, the public associated many of the former regime's political elite with the former regime, and this hindered their chances of election. One of my interviewees, the founder of the Society of Josip Broz Tito, found it impossible to find a job in his profession, much less a job in politics, because he has continued to be associated with the darkness of Yugoslavia, as he put it. A similar case is that of an interviewee who self-identifies as Serbian and found it uncomfortable to retain her position as the director of a history institute while Croatia was engaged in its war of independence against Yugoslavia and Serbian aggression. She ultimately went into early retirement, and she did not participate in politics in part because of her nationality, which would have been a political liability. In other words, public perception played a role in the paths that were open to the former regime's political elite and thus influenced their choices. A second factor that some interviewees took into account was their previous experiences with what it means to be a politician. One of my interviewees spent 4 years as the Croatian ambassador to Sweden. Beyond this, he chose not to be a politician, in part because, as he put it, being heavily involved in active politics isn't really good for the stomach. Another interviewee who held no elite political positions after 1990 stated that being involved in politics was never his first choice in life. With the regime change, he had the opportunity to try something new, ultimately entering the business sector at the elite level. Those who did continue their political involvement, holding multiple political positions at the elite level over time, often had personal experiences that showed a pattern of previous social and civic engagement. The third factor that influenced elites' political involvement was institutional. For example, one interviewee was involved exclusively in business until 1995, when she was chosen to be a representative in the Croatian parliament. For the duration of her mandate, she retained her position on the management board of a firm. However, in 2000, a law was passed that banned state employees from being members of firms' administrations. The purpose of the law was to prevent politicians from being unduly influenced by their employers, and at that point, the interviewee decided to become a professional politician. While her involvement in business stopped, her involvement in politics continued until her retirement in 2016. Even though most of my interview subjects are retired today, and only 3 can be considered to have had careers as professional politicians after 1990, all of them remain civically active. When asked whether or not they vote regularly, some interviewees noted that they sometimes have difficulty finding someone that they wish to vote for, but in all cases, they do vote, as one interviewee put it, in all regimes. My thesis follows the conventions of the literature and does not focus on the connection between elite movement and democratic outcomes. However, to conclude, I'd like to briefly consider the broader implications of my thesis. Because political elites influence political outcomes in their countries, it is important to know who they are. In the post-communist sphere, initial institutional change from communism to democracy was often catalyzed or otherwise influenced by the actions of the communist political elite. In the new democracy, it was the political elite who shaped and forged its institutions, both formal and informal. Simply because of the impossibility of finding leaders who had not been socialized under the former communist regime, it is not unreasonable to assume that the influence of communism persisted past its expiration date. A regime change entails transformation of the formal institutions governing a country, but although it may seem so at first glance, it does not necessarily entail a significant change in the people who are in power. This apparent contradiction has various implications for the quality of democracy that results. The people who comprise the elite matter, and in extension, my thesis may offer insight on elites in newly democratic states. Thank you.